Welcome to the PI show. My name's Harry NOWICKI. I'm a personal injury lawyer with my colleague Tony Carbone.
Good evening, Harry. Good evening,
who's another personal injury lawyer, and we talk about injuries in various contexts. And tonight we've got another special guest, or Maria's come back from last week by popular demand. Thanks, Maria.
Good evening.
Before we go to Maria, we've got what's in the news, Tony.
There's
always
been an interesting
something
story about. I'll read the headline. Kids' reign of terror. $400,000 compo can't erase a carer's nightmare.
So that's the Herald Sun?
That's the Herald Sun.
Okay. And they always pick up stories where people receive compensation.
Well, Harry, basically what we've got is these so-called carers looking after these kids. They're difficult kids. They'd be wards of state
That's right.
in 3 different locations for the McKillop Family Services, mainly Keilor Park, Werribee and Hoppers Crossing. Now, their job is to look after them a bit like parents would if they had mums and dads.
And the carer who sued was an ex-policeman.
Yeah, and he was basically staying in his room and he had to fear for his life because these kids are running rampant with hammers and knives and all sorts of things. That's the impression I get. So,
Well, the case went to court and a jury found in his favour on negligence and also found in his favour for pain and suffering and loss of income.
Loss of income, that's good.
So the total amount was $400,000, and
That's
a guess, something like $150,000 for pain and suffering, at a guess,
Yeah,
and
possibly.
something like $250,000 for loss of income, past and future.
But isn't it concerning that he's there to look after these children and some of them are 14 years of age and they're cutting loose with hammers and all sorts of things. He's fearing for his life. What's the answer, Marie? What could you do for these kids? What would you do to sort of
Look at that. I mean, it's a very complex question. They've obviously come from complex backgrounds. So treatment,
One issue was medication.
Medication, absolutely. I mean, it says that
Is that
some
an
of them
answer? Do you drug them up? What do you do?
Well, it's not the answer, but they're running around with hammers, and I mean,
sorts of
it's
things.
getting quite dangerous.
They're out of control. It's
That's
like
right.
a racket going on.
Exactly. Yeah.
But
So-
ultimately, the jury found there was negligence. They could have done something.
But what else could they do, Harry?
Well, it would have been put to the jury, and the jury found in the plaintiff's
Maybe
favour.
security, perhaps?
Maybe
You're trying to raise these kids with security guards. It's sad.
It is a sad
It
situation.
is very sad, yeah.
But anyway,
But tonight we better just discuss the role of psychologists in relation to work injuries, and also what happens to people after they suffer work injuries,
Yep.
and
How to
then
cope,
how they cope and what happens in practice. But we've got a couple of cases we're going to discuss, which is the first case is a case of Mrs. Norris, and she was subject to a armed robbery.
That's right.
She worked
Yeah.
in a service station. The armed robbery was about
midnight?
12 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
Someone wore a gorilla mask and they fired shots. None of the shots hit Mrs. Norris, but quite understandably she was traumatised.
She was, yeah.
How do people get over, or what's the diagnosis? What?
I think that one there is a very clear diagnosis. She was suffering post-traumatic stress disorder, and that's not something that's very easy to get over. So you really do need some proper psychological treatment, and if not, medication. So in that situation, it was really important that she be referred by her GP to a psychologist and possibly a
The name's
psychiatrist.
almost a misnomer, post-traumatic stress. Well, there's really no trauma in the true sense that she hasn't been physically assaulted.
Well, she hasn't been physically assaulted, but even to be in the fear of having someone come at you with a mask
and a gun and shots.
and then fire the gun.
It's a sudden traumatic event.
Absolutely, and completely. She's there in the service station, not expecting to.
Look, I think the history of post-traumatic stress syndrome, as I understand it, was war-related. Came out of the First World War.
That's right.
When people had, they couldn't quite diagnose what they were suffering from.
That's exactly
And
right.
a lot of people accuse soldiers of cowardice and not facing up to their duty, but their nerves were shattered.
Absolutely.
And it was a traumatic event.
What's the features of post-traumatic
There's
stress?
4 main features. The first one is re-experiencing. So basically, it's a sense of reliving the event over and over. So people may have nightmares. They may be walking down the street and see someone with a bag and think, oh, they've got a gun. So it's a sense of reliving the whole experience. Avoidance. So they may, this lady may have avoided a service station for,
shopping or
something where
Going out altogether, perhaps.
Yeah.
Exactly.
After dark.
Emotional numbing is the third, one of the third symptoms, and that's basically, maybe feeling sort of depressed or feeling anxious or feeling a bit numb to things.
Do you find that most people with post-traumatic stress have got symptoms of anxiety and depression?
Yeah, absolutely. They're anxious to go out, they're anxious to do things. They then become they're fearful of everything, and they then become depressed because they withdraw from their family. They sort of stop socialising, they stop talking, they stop living their life normally. So they become depressed because of that. And then the fourth one is hyperarousal, and essentially walking down the street and a car backfires and they think it's a gun. Yep. So they're in a high state of alert. Basically, so they're the 4 categories that you sort of need to look out for.
And that there's some objective evidence for all of that. I mean, you're relying on what people tell you.
Absolutely, but there's rigorous sort of psychological tests that you do on someone, and
to make sure the symptoms are there.
Last week was pretty bizarre. You had the itching of the scalp,
the physical injuries, the physical symptoms.
That's right.
Yeah, physical symptoms
manifested itself in a
So Mrs. Norris, I think, had the traumatic event.
She did.
There's no argument about that.
No.
In that case, I think they admitted liability.
They did.
Must have been a lousy
set some security. But interestingly enough, she attempted to go back to work and did go back to work.
But she couldn't cope.
Well, what happened when she went back to work, though?
Well, essentially, she was still reliving a lot of the experiences in her mind. So she was just in a state of anxiety. She couldn't focus. She really couldn't keep it together anymore.
She went back to some community centre between 9 and 25 hours a week. But they said that she was hopeless.
Yeah.
She wasn't really doing her job properly. She just couldn't go.
No.
So she lost that job.
She did.
And then, so at least she sort of trying to what's called mitigate a loss, trying to get back into the workforce. And I think the judge commented favourably about that.
She made an attempt. So I think that's
So she didn't lock herself away.
No, that's right.
Initially, but still suffered.
Yeah, look, we're being told to go to a sponsors break, so stay tuned, viewers. Don't go away. We'll be back very shortly. Thank you.